In decades past, buying a comic book would give you a complete story. But nowadays, the story just continues on, issue after issue after issue. We'll take a look back at some comics from different time periods, different companies, different writers, and see, are these comics any good? Can you read them out of context? You know, when I first started buying comic books years ago, it was pretty much guaranteed that you would buy a comic book and you would get a story. You would buy the book and take it home and read it cover to cover, and you got something complete. The superheroes would gather, the villains would come up with some sort of plan, they would attack, the superheroes would look like they're going to lose, they would fight back, they would find out some way to overcome the villains, they would win, and the story would end and everybody was happy. But now, you pick up a comic and you could be getting part 22 out of 59 of an ongoing storyline. I mean, who knows? Tom King's infamous quote about Batman was that he was going to go 100 issues on a story. And the problem was it made it where some issues you would get to where there wasn't much going on. You would read the entire issue and it was just one big fight of him punching people in the face and moving on, and nothing really happened. So that's why we're doing this series, Comic Books Out of Context. We're taking a look at comic books and trying to see, can you read them without knowing anything else about what's going on in the series, and see, do they make sense? So I've got a bunch of comics, different publishers, different writers, artists, different years, different decades even. Some of these from the 70s, some from a few years ago. We've got a stack and we're going through them, and I'm even adding some to them because I'm still traveling around going to comic shops. Even when I'm on vacation, I'm still thinking about comics and doing comic video stuff. So we've got some comics here, and I'm going to shuffle them up and just kind of randomly sift through them. And I'm going to grab one of these and I'm going to read it here, and we're going to see if it makes sense. Can I read it without knowing what came before? Maybe first time even being introduced to certain characters, and does it still make sense? Does the book do enough to bring me in as a reader, to fill me in on what's happening, and to make me want to read the story? And some books we've read in this series have been fantastic and have made me want to go out and read more, and some books have been dismal failures. So let's take a look here. Let's grab something randomly here and just see. Let's take a look at Protectors number 5. Oh my gosh. Because I just read Ferret number 6 not long ago. Protectors number 5. This is in the same universe, so I guess on this one I do have a tiny bit of context, because I just read Ferret number 6. Now this Protectors number 5. Some of you who are familiar with comics may be wondering, why does this sound familiar? Why does this look familiar? That's because this is an infamous comic book. This is one of the most infamous gimmicks of all time. In this issue, it's the death of a protector. They killed off one of the characters. So how did they want to make people know that? They cut a hole in the comic. You can see the chest of somebody here, and there's a hole going all the way through the comic. So we're going to read Protectors number 5, the infamous death issue here, and we're going to see, does it do enough to tell us who the protectors are? Does it do enough to build up who this character is? When he dies, does it make any difference? And then does the story resolve itself enough at the end that we feel like, okay, well then the story makes sense on its own, even though I know they want to make it some sort of cliffhanger to bring us back to the next issue. So we'll read Protectors number 5, the infamous death issue, and see if we can read this comic book out of context. All of you collectors that love your stuff being completely mint, look away now. Well, we are ripping open the bag. This has never been opened before. Brand new. Taking it out of the plastic. For some people, this is a complete nightmare. Oh my gosh. Now it's ruined. Now it has no resale value. This has been completely closed up since 1993. Okay, well, having just read Protectors number 5, I can say that at least the story on this one is fairly simple. Basically, as we said on the cover, you can see that someone is dying here, and if I was more familiar with them by looking at the cover, I could tell who the character was, because as I read the story, it became more apparent to me that it actually gives away on the cover that the character is Night Mask, who we see later on inside. Once I see him, he looks kind of like Karate Kid from Legion of Superheroes. Very similar look. And you can see that that's his open chest, which is part of his uniform on there. And then in the reflection, you can see Mr. Monday, who is the big bad guy. So that's all very apparent from the cover. So if I had been more familiar with the characters, then that would have been clear from the cover who it was who dies on the inside. So the bulk of the story has been given away right there. But the story makes it clear when it opens that there is a daytime team and a nighttime team, and the nighttime team is going to be going out on patrol. Stuff isn't working correctly, and as certain characters are introduced, it does give you a little bit of information about them. Enough that you can understand. For instance, the Night Mask character, he's trying to prove himself to his father, and his father is somehow connected to the Protectors team. He's an older superhero, and so now the son has become a superhero. Now, I don't know, was his father also Night Mask? That part's not really clear. But the son has joined the team, and now the son is trying to prove himself, which bodes very poorly, because once I realized, oh, that's the guy who's on the cover as dead, then you know he's not going to make it through the issue. As far as the issue goes, it's pretty basic. The bad guy says, hey, I have this plan, everybody follow it perfectly, and everything will work out exactly as we need it to. And then as the story unfolds, the only problem with the story, really, is that the communicators aren't working very well. And because the communicators are having problems for the Protectors team, then when Night Mask sees that there's something going on, he knows that he should contact the others. He tries, he can't get through to them, and instead of waiting for backup, he goes in alone, which of course, always a problem, right? Did Mr. Monday and the villainous team, did they do something to ruin the communicators? I don't know. That's not made clear in any way. And it would seem like that would have to be part of his plan in order to really make this work, because if that's not part of the plan, the plan wouldn't work. I mean, he sets a trap, and because one guy goes in alone, he's able to kill him. Now, I guess maybe the hope was, because it's the nighttime team, only part of them would arrive. You know, a few of them on patrol would show up, and then maybe the trap would be sprung, and he'd at least beat them up really good, even if he wouldn't destroy them, kill them outright. I guess maybe that's possible, but it just seems like the plan works because the communicators aren't working, and you would think that he'd have to have a hand in that, and if he doesn't, then what was his plan, really? So the story, as far as that falls apart, I'd say the biggest problem is that we see the father. The father has been injured somehow. He's also a superhero, but we don't, like I said, I don't know if he's also Night Mask 1 or something, but he says something about getting back in the harness, so I'm guessing he wears some suit of armor, some cybernetic thing, but he's been beat up, he's in the hospital, and when Night Mask falls into the trap and he's being beaten up by Mr. Monday and he's on the verge of death, we actually see his dad in the hospital watching this on TV, but once his son dies, we see the Protectors team bust into this place, and they find his body, but the bad guys are already gone. It never goes back to the dad. So we get no resolution. Like, that should be part of this, was at least seeing the dad's reaction, because as everything's happening, the dad is he's not too thrilled with his son. He doesn't think his son should have joined the team. Maybe he thinks his son isn't good enough. And then I guess he's proven correctly by his son dying. But it doesn't seem to play itself out to a natural point where you would take a break in between issues. And again, it's the same problem I had with Ferret. It's the same writer, R.A. Jones, wrote this as well as Ferret. And I see the same problem. I really do. He chose to have this great ending page where you just see the dead body sitting there, and it's like, oh my gosh, there he is, he's dead, and you have that moment of, I guess, shock and terror, whatever, because there's his dead body, but then at the same time, we don't get any reactions from it. None of that happens in this issue. And so everything that it's leading up to, you get that moment, there's his body, but you know it's going to happen. Like, it's not a shock ending because you know he's going to die. So it ends directly on that. What this really could have added was if it had happened 3/4 of the way through, and then we got to see how some of the people react to it, the way they, lash out or whatever, which I'm sure they want you to grab the next issue and it's going to show up in there, but at least go back to the dad. Does the dad really care that his son is dead or not? Did the dad set him up? Was he involved? I don't know. But it just seems like, again, we have this story that it's okay, but it's just not. It needs to be tweaked just a little bit more. It's like with a movie script. Sometimes you see a movie and it's like, it's good, but it just needed a rewrite to make it a little bit better. This is a story that the comic is okay. It's good. It's decent. It's professionally made. I mean, honestly, looking at this doesn't look that different from a Marvel or DC book. You really can't see it as being that different from anything from a mainline publisher. But it just needed that extra little kick to make it that much more of a professional book. It's good, but it's not great. It just needed that extra bit of polish to throw it over the edge. Can you read it out of context? Does it make sense? Yes, it does. I have to be fair here. It does introduce the characters who you really need to know, as far as Nightman, Mr. Monday, Man of War is the leader of the Protectors, the Protectors themselves as the team. It gives you enough information about all of them that as you're reading the story, at least you understand how they all fit together, what their relationships are. So not having read any of the others, at least that much makes sense. But is it good? No. If this was the only thing I read, I would not come back for the next issue, because even if it was in context, it's not satisfying. And so we answer the question, you can read it, but I don't think you'd want to without having the other parts of the story. It's one of those things where you have the information to understand what's happening, but to get any sort of real emotional impact from it, and to really get any sort of sense of why it matters, and why you care, why you should want to see anything more that happens with these characters. Is any of that in there? No. None of that is in here at all. So, Protectors number 5, you can read it out of context, but I don't think you'd want to. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Dirk, call me.
Wait.
Seriously, we should play together.